What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. Yesterday, I did a video on the top 10 most underrated teams heading into the 2021 college football season. Now we're going to give you the 10 teams that I think are being overrated the most. It doesn't mean that these teams are going to be bad, just that I think that they're being hyped up a little bit too much. And to be considered in this list, I'm talking about teams that I've seen on some type of top 25 poll, some type of prediction from ESPN or 24/7, one of those sites. Or also I'm basing this off of comments that I've seen on my videos. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through why I think each team maybe is overrated. And I hate doing this. I hate doing these videos that are negative because there's always you're going to make the fan bases mad, but it just is what it is. We're going to have to go through this, and we're going to give you the top 10 most overrated teams. Starting at number 10, we've got Missouri. Missouri 5-5 last season. They were a pretty big surprise in the SEC. I don't think many people expected them to be a mid-tier team in that conference. Still thought that they were a little ways away. And so you look ahead to 2021, and there's all this hype for Missouri. People talking about this team maybe being the second best team in the SEC East. I'm not buying that. I think this will be a quality team. But I think Florida, Kentucky might both finish ahead of Missouri this year in the SEC East. It's going to be close, I think, between Kentucky and Missouri. But you go back to last year, their last game of the season, they lost to Mississippi State 51-32. They barely beat Arkansas. Arkansas was a good team, don't get me wrong, but this is not a team that I think is ready to take a big leap this year or anything like that. When I look at the roster, yes, they'll be a quality team, but 9-3, 10-2, no, I don't think they're going to be really at that level. They only beat South Carolina by 7. South Carolina, we know, was pretty bad last year. So, just looking back at last season, I think that this was a good team, but I think maybe people thought they were a little bit better than they actually were, and that's carried over to this season. And again, Missouri will be a quality team, but just pump the brakes if you think that this is going to be a top 15 team or anything like that. At number 9, we've got USC. USC 4-1 last season. They were very lucky to be 4-1. Let's just be honest. They had some very close calls, had some come from behind wins in the fourth quarter. I don't think USC is going to be bad this year. I don't think that they're necessarily being overrated in where they've been ranked in the preseason. I just think that it goes back to the Pac-12 South. And if you watched the underrated video yesterday, we talked about Utah, UCLA, Arizona State. 3 teams from that division that I thought were being underrated because it feels like everyone's just assuming USC is going to win this division. They're the big name school. They won last year. But no, I think the Pac-12 South will be very competitive. Again, USC I think will be a good team. I think they have a good shot at winning that division, but I don't think they're clearly better than everyone else or anything like that. I think it's going to be a very competitive race in the Pac-12 South. So USC, in my opinion, a little bit overrated coming into this season. At number 8, we've got Notre Dame. Notre Dame finished 10-2 last year, made the college football playoff, and there are some fans that seem to think that that's just going to be the normal thing now. Notre Dame's going to be right back there this year. They're going to go undefeated, maybe lose a game, be back in the playoff. This is a rebuild year a little bit, I think, for Notre Dame. Now, they could still go on and have a great year. They could go 10-2. They could make a New Year's Six Bowl. But if we're talking about making the college football playoff, I just don't see that happening for Notre Dame this year. I think that they are going to be a little bit too young, lost too many key players, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And you've got some tough games. You got Wisconsin, you got Cincinnati, you got North Carolina. Even Florida State in that opener, I think, is going to be a tough matchup. So, yeah, Notre Dame will be a good team again this year, probably a top 10 team again, at least top 15. But if you're expecting them to be right back in the college football playoff, I think you're overrating this team just a little bit. At number 7, we've got Mississippi State. And this really comes back to the FBI. The FBI had Mississippi State as a top 10 team. I'm not seeing that anywhere else. I haven't seen Mississippi State in the top 10, top 15, any other preseason poll, but the FBI had Mississippi State in the top 10. And I have seen other people predicting Mississippi State to finish, to be a dark horse team in the SEC West, to finish maybe 3rd or 4th in that division. I don't think that's the case. I think they're going to be in a battle just to not finish in last place in that division, because the division is just going to be really, really tough. But I'm not sold on Mike Leach. I don't think he's going to get it done in year 2 and have a huge turnaround. It's a complete change from what they were doing before, and it's going to take a little bit of time. So Mississippi State, to me, definitely not a top 10 team, and arguably the worst team in the SEC West. So I think if you think that they're going to compete in that division or be a mid-tier team in that division, I think you're overrating this team. Number 6 is going to be Michigan State. Michigan State just 2-5 last season. I know they had that big win over Michigan, but then it turned out that Michigan just wasn't very good. The thing about Michigan State is they were so good for so long. They were right there, with Ohio State, with Michigan, with Penn State in the Big Ten East. They've really fallen off the last couple of years. I mean, they just have not been a great team. The offense has been just not good for them. The defense hasn't been as good as it used to be. They lost some key players as well. They're going to have to figure out, they've got to get better production from the quarterback spot if they're going to have a big year. And yet I still see people saying that you're talking about Ohio State's schedule or Penn State's schedule and talking about, they'll probably lose to Michigan State. No, Michigan State's going to probably get that win. No, Michigan State is just not on that level. They're not a top-tier team in the Big Ten East anymore. They might get back there, but it's not going to happen this year. Mel Tucker has not done anything, in my opinion, to prove that he is a top-tier coach. He might be, but again, we haven't seen that yet. And I think they're at least a year away from getting back to being one of those better teams in the division. So for me, Michigan State is just not going to be great this year. And if you think that they are, I think, again, you're overrating this team. Number 5 is Iowa State. Now, this one's kind of a tough one because it depends on where you're putting Iowa State. I think Iowa State, it might be the 6th best team in the country. I don't think they're in that top tier, though, with Oklahoma, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson. I don't think they're quite in that tier. The FBI had them, I believe, at number 4. I don't think they're quite there. And I think they're right behind those teams. They're in that second tier, and they're going to be really good. But I don't think that they're ready to make that big of a leap. I mean, just look at the overall talent of this Iowa State team compared to those other 5 teams that I just named. It's not even close. Yes, they're going to be a good team. Yes, they're well coached. Yes, they're going to have a shot to win the Big 12 this year. But are they a top 4 team? I'm sorry, I don't really see that. I think they'll have a great year this year. But if you're wanting to put them into that top 4 tier or into that playoff field, I'm sorry, I just don't see that happening. Maybe they sneak in there somehow, but I don't think they're going to be able to compete with those top tier teams. So Iowa State, a little bit overrated. There are others that think they're way overrated, that this is not even a top 10 team. Now, I think they are a top 10 team, so I'm not part of that group, but I do think that maybe some are overrating this team just a little bit. Number 4 is UCF. UCF 6-4 last season. I think they were underrated last year. When you go back and look at their season last year, they lost a lot of close games. They took Cincinnati down to the wire. They were pretty much all of their losses, I think, were really close. They had that Cincinnati game, lost by 8 to Tulsa. I think that's a game that they had a lead in. They lost to Memphis by 1. They had to play BYU in their bowl game, but it's a team that was better than their record would suggest. This was a good team last year, maybe a top 25 team, but we're looking at 2021, and when you look at this team and you look at this roster, they lost a lot of guys. They lost some key guys on defense, lost some key players on offense, top 2 running backs. Dylan Gabriel is back. Gus Malzahn's coming in. I understand those 2 things right there are enough to give you some hype if you're a UCF fan. But those that are saying that this team is a dark horse playoff contender or that they're a top 10 team possibly, I'm sorry, I just don't see that. It's a top 25 team maybe the second best team in the American behind Cincinnati. Are they going to be able to knock off Cincinnati and take first place in that conference? I don't know. That's a tough ask. Cincinnati's going to be really good this year. But, I hope they do. You guys know as far as a fan goes, I am a fan of Auburn, and I like Gus Malzahn, and I'm going to be rooting for UCF. But you also know that I keep things unbiased here on the channel, and I call it like I see it. And I just don't see the talent on this UCF team being enough to be in that playoff type conversation. I've seen some put them up there. I think it's a team that'll be fighting for a top 25 spot, but not a top 10 spot. Number 3 is North Carolina. They were 8-4 last season, and you guys know what the hype is of North Carolina. And let's be clear here. You go back to last year, preseason. I had North Carolina in the top 10. Everyone called me crazy. They lost a couple of games they shouldn't have lost and ultimately did finish with 4 losses. But you could argue that this was a top 10 team last season. Fast forward to 2021. The defense was really young last year. They're going to be much better there. Sam Howell is back at quarterback. Ty Chandler transfers in at running back. But they do lose a couple of really good ones there. A couple of big-time playmakers on the outside at wide receiver. Yes, North Carolina is going to be good. I think they will be a top 10 team this year. But when I say overrated, I'm really talking to those that seem to think that North Carolina is just automatically going to win the ACC Coastal. They're going to go 12-0, maybe 11-1. They're going to play Clemson, and they're going to have a really good shot to knock off Clemson and make the college football playoff. There are plenty of people that think that about North Carolina. I'm sorry, I'm not going to go that far with this team. Miami is going to be really good, and Miami is going to challenge North Carolina in that division. And I think they're going to be looking for revenge, of course, in that head-to-head matchup. I know last year was a blowout, and that's a big reason why I think North Carolina gets a lot of the hype that they're getting. But that game, I think, was a little bit of a fluke. North Carolina could absolutely win the Coastal Division. I think they are the favorites. But to just assume that they're going to go 11-1 or 12-0, which is what I'm seeing all over the place, and that they're going to, be one win away, beating Clemson from making the college football playoff, or maybe going 12-0 and not even needing to beat Clemson. I've seen that thrown out there as well. I don't think North Carolina is quite to that level. Again, this is a team that lost to Florida State and Virginia last year. They have not been able to, they've had a lot of close games the last couple of years, and they haven't been able to win all of those. I think they're going to be really good, but I don't really see them being in that playoff conversation at the end of the year. Number 2 is Iowa, another team that is really being hyped up this preseason. A lot of people picking Iowa to win the Big Ten West, thinking that this is a team that could also potentially crash the playoff party. I'm sorry, I don't agree. Iowa has a great shot to win the Big Ten West. Are they the favorites? I don't think so. I think Wisconsin is probably the favorites in that division, but I think it's a wide open division. I don't think there is a clear favorite at all. And I know I get the hype with Iowa. You lose your first 2 games, close, 1-possession games, and then they go on a tear and they beat everyone else on their schedule. They beat Wisconsin 28-7. They beat Penn State by 20 points. I understand that, and I think Iowa was underrated last year. This was a really, really good team. I don't think people realize how good this Iowa team was last year, but we're not talking about last year. We're talking about 2021, and when I look at the roster, when I look at everything they lost, I don't know if there is enough there to where Iowa is going to be a playoff contender or a clear favorite in the Big Ten West. I just don't see it. Spencer Petras was okay for them at quarterback, but he's got a long way to go if they're going to be a really good team. You lose Sargent at running back, lose some depth there. Yes, they have Tyler Goodson coming back, though, so that's good news. You lose Brandon Smith, Marset at wide receiver, your 2 top wide receivers. Sean Bayer gone at tight end. They lose the majority of their offensive line from last year. We're talking about a great offensive line. You got to replace those guys. And then on the defensive line, losing some great players. Chauncey Golston gone. Davion Nixon gone. Jack Heflin, really, really good players. I don't think people realize what this team is losing. They lose a few guys at linebacker as well. Now, the secondary is really solid. They got everyone pretty much coming back there. But big holes up front on the offensive line and defensive line. And that is usually an area where you can kind of say that a team is going to struggle or they're going to be worse if they lost a lot on the offensive line and then on the defensive line. So that's, to me, where I'm worried about Iowa. I think they'll be a quality team, a top 25 team. They'll have a shot in the Big Ten West. I'm not counting them out. But to say that they're a clear favorite or that they're anywhere near the college football playoff, I don't think so. Iowa just not quite to that level, or they won't be in 2021. So our most overrated team, though, number 1, is Texas A&M. Texas A&M getting a ton of hype this preseason. Now, before I get into Texas A&M, let's just go back. Let's rewind to last year because people are starting to say that I'm a Texas A&M hater and I don't like this team, whatever. Rewind to 2020 preseason. I picked Texas A&M to make the college football playoff. I think it seems like everyone forgets that. I thought this team was going to be really good last year. I said they would lose to Alabama. They would beat everyone else on their schedule. That's exactly what happened. I didn't say that they were going to lose 2 or 3 games. They did exactly what I thought they were going to do, and if Ohio State had not been in there, if the Big Ten had not decided to play, Texas A&M would have made the college football playoff last year. This is a great team. But it seems like everyone is just expecting them to be right back where they were last year, not looking at everything that they lose. And I know Jimbo has done a great job of recruiting. They have been a top 5 class now for a few years in a row, and they've got talent, and they're going to be a good team. But to just assume that they're going to be, and I've seen this multiple times in the comments, this team is 12-0, 11-1 at worst. 11-1 at worst? I disagree with that. I think this is probably a 9-3 team at worst, an 11-1 team at best. I don't see them going 12-0. Are they a playoff contender? I mean, yeah, they could maybe sneak in there, but I don't think they're, again, on that level of the top 5 teams. But yeah, there's a path for them. So I'm not saying that they have no shot to make the college football playoff, but I think it's going to be really tough for them. You'd have to lose one game when you have to play Alabama. You have to play LSU. I think they go on the road to LSU as well. They're going to have other teams, tough teams in the division. Arkansas will be a good team. Ole Miss will be a good team. Auburn will be a good team. It's going to be hard to beat all of those teams and not lose more than one game. So for me, Texas A&M is a little bit overrated. They lost some key players on defense, lost 4 of their 5 starters on the offensive line, which again is usually a recipe for a team getting worse. Kellen Mond is gone. I know everyone keeps saying, well, Haynes King's a better quarterback than Kellen Mond. If he was better, he would have started last year. I'm sorry. It is what it is. Unless Jimbo is just playing favorites with Kellen Mond, he could be really good. He may be really good. And if he is a superstar in his first year as a starter, Texas A&M is going to have a really good shot to make the college football playoff. But that's not something that I've seen, and I can't judge Haynes King because I've never seen him play meaningful college football, and so it's just all hype right now. And because of that, I think this team is overrated coming into the season. They are a top 10 team, don't get me wrong, but when you start talking about 11-1 as their worst case scenario, that's where I got to say that Texas A&M is overrated. What do you guys think? Do you agree or disagree with my list here? Who do you think is overrated that I left off? Who do I have on my list that you think is not overrated? Give me your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.